and welcome to the Flourishing Introvert Talks with me, Jo Rawbone. This is the podcast that celebrates the natural gifts of introverts so that we can flourish in all situations. Episode 156, An Introvert's Survival Guide to Toxic Workplaces. I've been working both in and with corporate clients for nearly 48 years, and in that time I've experienced toxic individuals, toxic teams, and toxic organisations. And the saddest thing universally is that many of them are delusional about the existence of the toxicity. They'll make light of it, call it banter, mock anyone who calls it out, and suggest that if you don't like it, you should grow a pair. And yes, I've had that said to me as a woman too. Robert Sutton, a Stanford University professor who studies organisational behaviour and is the author of The A-Hole Survival Guide, says it succinctly. A toxic work environment leaves you feeling like dirt. The reason that toxicity is so easy to dismiss is that it is baked into the fabric of the organisational culture. We're talking dysfunctional teams, and as Lencioni describes, that starts with a lack of trust, which undermines psychological safety, allowing a hostile environment to reign supreme. I'm also mindful that the term toxic is bandied around pretty liberally these days, so let's just have a roundup of how it really feels to be caught in a toxic system. Hang on to your hats. You might feel chronically stressed and dread going to work. You're probably doing more than your fair share and not being appreciated for your efforts. You might be being bullied, being on the receiving end of repeated mistreatment, and this includes being threatened, humiliated, intimidated, or receiving abuse. You're being excluded in some way and treated unfairly. You feel like you're walking on eggshells around unpredictable people. Now, no one enjoys feeling like this, and because I like to see the good in people, I like to think that no one sets out to create a toxic environment. But the absence of feedback and appropriate consequences means the toxicity festers and worsens. For introverts who are already overstimulated mentally and doing their best to focus and do their best work, bullying, ridiculing and discrimination, even when passed off as light-hearted and a joke, can be enough to tip us over the edge. We need to see the gaslighting and shaming for what they are: psychological manipulation. In order to tackle this effectively, I suggest that we introverts need to develop our own survival kit that isn't just running away or keeping our heads down. I found it helpful to adopt the positive rebel attitude I talked about in episode 97. I'll make sure there's a link in the show notes so that you can listen again after this episode. Once we remember that up to 50% of any population identifies as an introvert, we're reminded that there will be many others cheering us on, albeit quietly, as we rebel against the toxicity. Once other introverts are in their own flourishing stride, they'll be right alongside us and maybe even taking the lead. This reminds me of the touching reason why some large birds, such as geese, fly in a V formation. Scientists have found that this shape helps protect the flock to make better progress, and the flock can fly 70% further than one bird flying alone. This is because the leader at the front breaks up the wall of air that the flock is flying into, and the wake of swirling air behind the lead bird gives a lift to the birds immediately behind their wings. And this continues all along the V shape, so every bird is being helped by the one in front. If only this were true in the workplace. I've lost count of the number of times I've heard supervisors, managers and leaders say they don't have time to help those further down the ranks. They're too busy. Back to our bird formation though.
Because there is trust and mutual understanding, at some point the lead bird who has done their fair share of heavy lifting, or in this case air moving, drops back to make space for another bird to take the lead. And this is usually an experienced bird too. Geese are well known for communicating as they fly. Indeed, you may have heard their honking as they fly overhead, which is probably in part encouragement. And we all need that, right? And if one bird is injured, others will land with it until it is healed, and then they form a new V as they return to the wing. So they support each other when needed. This story from nature points to a couple of things that are missing or inadequate in a toxic work culture: communication and support. I'll talk more on those later, and in the meantime, what else have my introverted clients said they class as toxic in a workplace? Number 1, lack of alone time. We know we need time to ourselves to recharge, but in many workplaces that's just not possible. Open plan offices, constant noise and chatter, and little or no private space can make it difficult for introverts to focus and feel comfortable. Number 2, this lack of private space is compounded post-pandemic, with many organisations reducing their office space so that people have to hot desk. Many introverts struggle with this and frankly would prefer to keep working from home. But those who ask for that are shamed for being non-team players. But as we know, there's more to it than that. Number 3 is the constant interruptions. We know that typically introverts thrive when we're able to focus and can get easily disrupted by coworkers chatting, by hearing people on phone calls, and by general interruptions. In many workplaces, interruptions are a constant occurrence and even encouraged as part of the office banter, which can be extremely stressful for introverts. Number 4 is overbearing or intrusive co-workers. Introverts often prefer to work independently as social interaction distracts them from their task. Many that I have worked with talk of overbearing, intrusive and even bullying co-workers, which makes it difficult for them to perform at their best. Introverts usually take pride in their work, so this can be distressing for us. Number 5, high pressure environments. Introverts tend to work best when we have time to think, to process information, and to reflect before responding. That think, say, think communication process I talk about. In high-pressured, fast-paced environments, introverts may struggle to keep up and may feel overwhelmed. This overwhelm can lead to burnout if not addressed regularly. Number 6, lack of understanding. Most workplaces are designed for extroverts, and the needs and preferences of introverts are often ignored or misunderstood. This lack of understanding can lead to introverts feeling excluded, marginalised, or even discriminated against in the workplace. And those two from earlier? Number 7, communication. There are a number of markers here that indicate toxicity. They include being kept in the dark, or worse still, being lied to, an acceptance of passive-aggressive interactions. I talked about this in episode 140, Why We Need to Assert Ourselves. Again, I'll put the link in the show notes. We can also add a feedback famine to that list where people are not being told how they are doing. How can we improve if people don't give us actionable feedback in the first place? Number 8, support. Or in the case of a toxic workplace, lack of support. As an employee, you have the right to be supported by your immediate manager and HR. The problem arises, though, when your immediate manager is part of the toxicity. HR is your natural route then, and let's hope that colleagues don't dissuade you, saying you're just making a fuss. In other words, just comply with the toxic culture or the organisation will spit you out. It's important for employers and managers to understand the needs of introverts and to create a workplace that is supportive and inclusive of all personality types. This can help to improve morale, productivity, and overall satisfaction, meaning that employee retention is going to be greater. And let's add number 9 to the list, behaviour, because this is where we get to the culture of an organisation. After all, culture is how people actually behave, not the nice words they post on the office walls. MIT Sloan identified 5 toxic attributes, and they are disrespectful, non-inclusive, unethical, cutthroat, and abusive. Within these 5, during my years as a trainer, facilitator and coach, I've noticed behaviours that I refer to as my star of dismay. Favouritism, unpredictability, blaming, shaming, and ghosting. Because of the psychological nature of these behaviours, we can be driven to doubt our own sanity, which is when we're likely to retreat or withdraw completely. And the conclusion we draw in retreat is that often we are the problem. Which of those 9 do you agree with? Which of those have you experienced? I've experienced all of them, either directly or vicariously, in those nearly 48 years of working with organisations. And I find it rather sad that so many are still prevalent in today's more woke society. What I thought might be helpful would be to split the survival kits into tentative introverts through to flourishing introverts. So those just starting to own their introversion, the tentatives, have some workable options, and those already flourishing and ready to lead the way have more stretching options. So what's in the introvert survival kit to deal with toxicity? As just mentioned, I have some ideas for tentative introverts and some for what I've called midway before we get to the flourishing introverts. And because these ideas build on each other, each layer is in addition to the previous one. For the tentative, really pay attention and notice what's going on around you, as this will give you choices later on. The temptation can be to put your head down and try and ignore it. But actually we do need to notice it. You may even want to document what is happening. You don't have to do anything with it right now, but someday you might be pleased that you had it chronicled. Recognise when a passive-aggressive game is being played and don't get hooked into it. Realise that the game being played says more about the other person and their lack of integrity, confidence and courage than it says about you. Games only deliver the payoff when someone takes the bait and plays along. So abstaining essentially stops the game, for you at least. Plan your pre-charging and recharging time and activities and hold them sacrosanct. Failure to do this begins the slippery slope to burnout. Book a quiet space whenever you can so that you minimise distractions. And finally, find a rant buddy, someone you can offload to confidentially without exposing your vulnerabilities to everyone at this early stage. And add to that for the midway introverts. Let people know your communication process. Mine and many other introverts is that think, say, think that I mentioned earlier on. But business colleagues are not mind readers, so we have to help them understand. Start imagining and defining your personal boundaries so that you can install them and defend them at a later stage. You might want to check out episode 120 for that. Again, link in the show notes. And then, on top of that, for the flourishing, assertively ask for what you need, be that feedback, clarity of message, or more information. Call out the passive-aggressive and even aggressive games from your adult ego state if you feel skilled enough. And see if you can invite them to join you from their adult ego state in the communication. Interacting from your adult ego state is essential for good quality assertive communication. This is also the time to install, defend and maintain those boundaries that we looked at a little earlier on, so that you can step into your power. Focus on your circle of control and circle of influence, and then action accordingly. Remember to let go of those things that you can neither influence nor control, although just because you can't do anything doesn't mean someone else can't. So this might be the time to engage others for leverage. Energy and effort spent in the wrong area is wasted and will just drain your batteries further. Be the lead goose and support those further back in the flight pattern. They may not yet have your courage, your presence of mind, or your confidence, so please watch out for them. And finally, continue your own flourishing journey. It's a choice you make day by day, moment by moment, and when we flourish together, toxicity is diluted. Finally, a reminder to us all, toxicity not only damages morale, it also damages our health and well-being. I'm not willing to let toxicity win, and I trust you're not either. The choice is yours now. Let it continue and be at its mercy, or take appropriate action to dampen its effect. Let's flourish together.
If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, then please subscribe, rate us and leave a comment, because we know that helps other people find the podcast. And if other people find us, other introverts can flourish.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.